Some memories stay with us like ghosts, haunting the edges of our lives. They whisper in quiet moments, reminding us of what we tried to forget. Lost Records is not just a game about 4 high school girls in the 1990s. It's about how childhood trauma never really leaves us. It hides in silence, shapes who we become, and resurfaces when we least expect it. The 1990s were a decade of contradictions, and for many Gen Xers and millennials, it was a time of mixtapes, late-night phone calls, and the explosion of grunge. But it was also a time when trauma, domestic abuse, discrimination, and the scars of loss were rarely named for what they were. Children endured it quietly, because the culture around them didn't always take it seriously. Therapy was whispered about, not embraced. Pain was hidden, disguised as normality, and so many carried it forward into adulthood, thinking it was just the way life had to be. This is where Lost Records becomes more than a story. The game's narrative spans 2 timelines, 1995 and 2022, reflecting how unresolved trauma follows us through the years. In 1995, Swan, Autumn, Nora, and Kat find each other in friendship, music, and youthful rebellion. They form their band, Bloom and Rage, in the middle of an era defined by angst and yearning for connection. But one fateful night in a cabin changes everything. A fire burns, a secret is buried, and their friendship fractures under the weight of silence. When we return to these characters nearly 30 years later, they are no longer girls. They are women, carrying scars that shaped entire lifetimes. The game does not romanticize their reunion. It feels fragile, uneasy, and haunted by what remains unsaid. And in this haunting, the game touches on something universal. We all carry ghosts from our youth. Some are fond memories, but others are traumas that follow us, often unrecognized, into our adult lives. Lost Records is not just about 4 women. It's for anyone. Coping with pain from the past, especially the pain left unspoken, but often find ways to come back, like a ghost. The first hours of Lost Records are soaked in the atmosphere of 1995. To posters for rock and girl bands hang on the wall. The girls trade mixtapes and talk about songs like their sacred text. The VHS fuzz of the visuals pulls the player back to a time before smartphones, before constant connection. On the surface, it feels like nostalgia, but nostalgia here is a mask. Beneath it lies something heavier. The 90s in this story is not just a time period, it's present. The abyss, a strange and surreal place the girls discover, becomes the perfect metaphor for trauma. It is vast, unknowable, and terrifying. Once entered, it cannot be unseen. The abyss mirrors the way trauma works. Children stumble into experiences they can't fully understand. Abuse, loss, violence, and those experiences become a hidden world they carry forever. For Gen Xers and millennials, the 90s were filled with these hidden abysses. A parent's alcoholism, a friend's disappearance, a sibling's illness. These were things often endured in silence. The world outside carried on with its music, its malls, and sitcoms. While inside, many kids carried storms they couldn't name. The game captures this duality perfectly. The girls' laughter is real, but it coexists with a darker undercurrent that will one day pull them apart. When the cabin burns and Kat disappears, the story crystallizes this theme. Trauma is not only about what happens, it's about what's left behind. The fire doesn't just destroy a cabin, it destroys the illusion of safety. It creates silence, guilt, and distance that follows the girls into adulthood. That night becomes a scar etched across decades, and the scar is never just in the past. It shapes who they are in 2022. It shows that the past isn't gone. It's alive and demanding recognition even after 30 years. At the center of Lost Records lies the bond between Swan, Autumn, Nora, and Kat. Their friendship feels like a lifeline in 1995, a fragile spell cast in a world that often doesn't understand them. Forming their band is an act of defiance, a way to claim space and identity. Bloom and Rage is more than music to them. It's their escape and their voice, converging together at once. And yet, the very things that bind them together are also fragile. Secrets creep in, fear takes root, and the spell begins to crack. Friendship in adolescence often feels eternal. We believe these people will walk with us forever, but time, and especially trauma, test those bonds. The night of the fire becomes the fracture point. Their friendship collapses. Not because the love wasn't real, but because the weight of silence was heavier. What they endured together was too big, too terrifying to be spoken aloud. And silence is its own form of betrayal. When the girls reunite in 2022, friendship feels different. It is no longer effortless. It is work. It is tension. You can tell their laughter feels cautious, as if it might break at any moment. Their pauses stretch long, heavy with what's unsaid. The reunion is not healing. It is a reckoning. And through this, the game reminds us of a universal truth. Friendships are not just shaped by joy. They are shaped by the traumas we endure, together or apart. This is where the theme of generational silence emerges. In the 90s, few tools existed for young people to process trauma collectively. There was no widespread cultural language for post-traumatic stress disorder, abuse, or grief. These girls are left to navigate it alone, with only each other to lean on. Their spell breaks, and like so many real friendships, it doesn't die cleanly. It lingers, haunting them into adulthood. Lost Records is not a ghost story in the literal sense, but it is full of ghosts. The most powerful among them is regret. Regret fills the silences between the characters. It clings to the choices they made and the ones they never had the courage to make. The lockbox discovered years later becomes a symbol of this regret. It holds memories, secrets, and truths the girls tried to hide even from themselves. Opening it is painful because it means reopening wounds, but keeping it closed is worse because it means living in denial. This tension between speaking and silencing, between opening and burying, is the heart of the game's haunting. The silence between them is an apparition they created, and the regret they share. Regret is familiar to all of us. How many of us replay conversations in our minds, wondering what would have happened if we'd spoken differently? How many of us wonder if we failed a friend, or failed ourselves, at a moment that mattered most? The characters of Lost Records embody this ache. Their regret is tied to something catastrophic, but its shape is universal. This is where the game connects most deeply to trauma. Trauma often leaves us with regret, not only about what happened, but about how we responded. Did we fight hard enough? Did we protect the people we love? Or did we let silence win? These questions haunt survivors long after the event itself. For Gen Xers and Millennials, raised in a culture where silence was the norm, regret often became the only outlet for grief. And Lost Records captures this truth with devastating clarity. On the surface, Lost Records is drenched in nostalgia. The 1990s are everywhere. Flannel shirts, cassette players, the glow of arcade screens. But the game doesn't use nostalgia to comfort us. It uses it to unsettle us. For the characters, and for players who lived through the decade, these details carry weight. A mixtape isn't just a mixtape. It's a reminder of friendships that fractured. A band poster isn't just decor. It's a reminder of dreams abandoned. Every nostalgic detail carries both sweetness and sorrow. This is why nostalgia in Lost Records feels dangerous. It lures us in with familiarity, then confronts us with the darker truths beneath. For many Gen Xers and Millennials, the 90s were both formative and brutal. It was a time of cultural expression, but also a time when many forms of trauma were invisible. It happened in silence while the world celebrated its pop culture. The game forces us to reconcile those two truths, showing us that some memories are not pure, they're double-edged. That's why Lost Records resonate across generations. It doesn't let nostalgia stand in as comfort food alone. It asks us to see the full picture of the past, the joy and the pain. It asks us to recognize how memories, like the abyss, is both a wonder and a terror. And in doing so, it reminds us that the past isn't just something we visit, it's something that still lives inside us. By the end of Lost Records, the truth is clear. The past never dies. The cabin fire, Kat's disappearance, and the silence that followed. It all impacted the girls the same. And as women, they still can't escape it, no matter how much time has passed. The past demands they confront it. It is the only exodus for their ghosts. And the game is both intimate and universal, in cementing the emotional connection between trauma and the courage to admit you are struggling to move on. Yes, the game is about 4 fictional characters, but the message is real. We all carry memories we'd rather bury. Some of us carry horrible memories that shaped us in negative ways. And whether we acknowledge them or not, the longer we try to silence them, the louder they become. Lost Records is a powerful game, in my opinion, because it mirrors the reality of an entire generation. Childhood and early adulthood trauma often went unnoticed or dismissed as something to simply get over in the 80s and 90s. Mental health was stigmatized, especially in marginalized communities, and pain was normalized. Survival meant silence, but silence is not healing. Negative experiences will haunt you, like a ghost, well into adulthood, shaping your relationships, your careers, and even your sense of self. Lost Records is more than a narrative adventure. It is a meditation on trauma, memory, and the ghosts of the past. It tells the story of 4 girls in the 1990s, but it also tells the story of a generation raised in silence. It asks us to reflect on the ways our childhoods still shape us, even decades later. For many of us, the story's themes feel achingly familiar. We lived through traumas that were never named or validated, and carried them quietly into adulthood, mistaking their weight for normality. Lost Records shines a light on that haunting truth, showing us that what remains unspoken still shapes who we become. And it tells this story with care, honesty, and deep empathy. The story this game crafted reminded me that memories are never neutral. They hold both joy and pain, both light and dark. It shows us that trauma doesn't simply fade with time. It transforms, echoing across the years, haunting us until we finally face it. And it leaves us with a truth. just as heavy as it is hopeful. But healing, though difficult, begins with recognition.